Hello YouTube, Gorod Radio Moscow here again with another beer review for you. So as is usual, we're going to continue on with the German series of beer reviews, and we're going to look at one from the big brewery here in Heidelberg. For those of you who don't know, Heidelberg is a small university town right between Frankfurt and Stuttgart in the sort of western side of Germany, Baden-Württemberg to give you the state. But we're going to have a look at the big brewery from Heidelberg and look at their Pils beer. I've already reviewed 3 beers from this brewery for you before, so if you're interested in those, have a little look in the video description and you can see the link to the other beer reviews there, and check that out if you are interested. And the link to the brewery website is also in there, so have a look at that if you're interested in learning more about the brewery. But as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll take you through a brief history of the brewery and tell you a little bit about where the beer is from. But as I always say, if you're interested in the tasting only, then just go towards the second part of the video. So, many of you will have actually heard of the Reinheitsgebot of 1516, and that's the strict code by which most German beer is brewed. And in Heidelberg there is actually an even stricter code that was issued in 1603, and there's more, it's even stricter than the Reinheitsgebot of course, but there's more regulation on the actual raw materials and on the brewing process here. And they actually do brew a beer in accordance with that still in the Heidelberger Brewery today. But 150 years after the introduction of this law in 1603 in Heidelberg, the Heidelberger Brauerei was born in the year 1753, but by 1816 there were apparently a total of 38 breweries operating in the city of Heidelberg. And the original property of the Heidelberger Brewery changed many times, and it was continually growing through this period. But it was taken over by the Kleinlein brothers in the year 1820, and at that time the property was called the Kleinlein, and it consisted of a residential house, a 3-storey brewery, a steam engine, a refrigerated ship for the river, of course the Neckar being the river that runs through Heidelberg there. You have a stables, a malts house, and also a rock cellar where they would store the beer. And at this time they only brewed from September until May, and the extra production was actually embedded in the rock cellars and the castle, and they used ice from the Neckar River and from the castle pond and stored the beer there until the summer came and they would sell the beer. So back in these early days, all the hops and ingredients were actually locally cultivated, and the brewers had to rely on their own experience and observations to get the brews to come out correctly. But in 1807, the Kleinlein brothers bought a property in Bergstrasse, which is number 91 today, actually not very far at all from where I live. I need to go and check it out. But there they built a new brewery which became their main base, and the secret of their success was apparently brewing a light beer in the Viennese style, although unfortunately the brothers struggled to keep up with the finances of this brewery, having built such a big and costly facility, and they actually sold the brewery to engineer Louis Scholl, and the brewery was then renamed the Heidelberg Brauerei Kleinlein Heidelberg. But Karl Kleinlein, one of the brothers there, he actually remained as the brewmaster and as a board member until the year 1897. But by 1900, only 6 of the Heidelberg breweries remained, and this was the Kleinlein, the Heidelberger Brewery as it is today, the Strudel Brewery, Angels, Golden Keg, Crown and Ziegler. But over the following 20 years, many of these breweries were bought over or shut down, and so by 1920, only the Heidelberg Brauerei and the Angels Brauerei were actually left. But the progress of the Heidelberg Brauerei over this time, however, was non-stop. In 1897, they appointed their first ice cream maker, and many German breweries in fact point out the year that they had their first ice cream maker in their histories. I'm not sure quite what the big deal is with that, but they always seem to be very proud of when they get their first ice cream makers, if you like. But they also purchased their first motor cars for the beer deliveries in 1912, and that year as well they also converted the brewery to steam power with a few steam engines that they acquired. But by this time the Brauerei was actually one of the largest breweries in Baden and the leading local brewery in the city of Heidelberg. Now in 1914 you obviously had the outbreak of the First World War, but for the Heidelberg Brauerei it was actually significant because this was the first time that they used the castle as their trademark, and this has stayed with the brewery despite numerous changes in ownership since then. But the brewery changed hands once in 1934 and then again about 30 years later in 1968 when it was bought over by the Schultheiss Brewery from Berlin, and this signalled the end of their independence for a short while. But the brewery was however allowed to continue to operate in Heidelberg despite this. But in 1985 the brewery was renamed Heidelberg Castle Brauerei AG. AG, of course, AG is just a suffix, if you like, for business in Germany, similar to Incorporated or LTD that you get in Britain and the US, of course. But then it was finally bought over by Werner Kindermann, and it joined his restaurant chain. But it changed hands once again in 2005 when it was bought over by Michael Mack, and then it became the Heidelberger Brauerei, and that's the name that it retains to this day. But Apparently it's one of the few existing private breweries and the oldest surviving brewery in Heidelberg, and Michael Mack has steered the brewery in the direction of environmental sustainability and sustainable economic and business growth. So today they actually brew it in the Pfaffengrauen district of Heidelberg in a very modern facility, and they use all raw materials from the local region. So it's really cool in that sense. And there are 2 other small brew pubs in Heidelberg. You have the Kulte Brauerei Heidelberg and Wetter Alt Heidelberger Brauerei as well. And you also have the brewery in Ziegelhausen, which is the Brauerei Zone close to Hof Heidelberg. But this is the main brewery that kind of sends their beer all across the country in Germany. The other ones are quite small scale operations. But to list the other beers that you can get from the Heidelberger Brauerei, you can get the 1603 beer, which is the Pils that's brewed in accordance with the Heidelberger beer order, and you can also get an alcohol-free variety of that, and I have reviewed the 1603 Pils for you before. Like I say, check out the video link in the description there. You can get the Premium Export, which I'll review for you at a later date. You get the Kristallweizen, Dunkelweizen and Hefeweizen Hell. You can get the Original, the Pils, the Dunkel, the Naturtrub, which is a Keller beer obviously, the Lenzenbock, and also the Winterbier. And I'm disappointed that I missed out on getting a bottle of the Winterbier. I would have loved to review that for you because it was a really beautiful beer on tap. But I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a little look at the bottle here. A lot of the Heidelberger beers tend to have these kind of similar labels. I'm just getting a bit of funny thing off the light there, so I'll just turn it off. But as you can see, all of the beers tend to have this sort of cross stripe on them there, and you can see, if I bring that closer to the camera, you can see the little bits of the castle there. It's not focusing very well. And each of the different bottles have their own bottle caps as well, and it's the same, basically just the same colour as the label. But all of these are unique for the Heidelberg Brewery, apart from the Bock and the Original, which kind of have the pop-open tops there. So let's get this guy out and get on with the tasting. It's a 4.7% Pils beer, and they describe it apparently as being ideal for a night with friends. So we'll see how we get on with that. So as you can see, a little bit of a smoky opening there, just a nice little bit coming off. It's kind of smoked up a little bit there, but we'll get it out and see how we get on. And as you might have guessed with the Pils, I'm getting a lot of grassy smell off this actually as I pour it. But as you might have guessed, it's a very sort of pale straw golden colour. It's actually going to have a big head on it, this guy. Quite impressive that for a kind of more mass-produced beer. As you can see, this is the kind of typical way the Germans want their heads on their beer. They like it to have a nice kind of convex thing coming out. But we'll have a look at the beer while we wait for that to calm down a bit. As you can see, it's quite a bumpy head actually, but there's sort of froth in the middle. It's bumpy around the edges, but as you can see, it's a transparent beer. A lot of carbonation visible coming to the surface in this one. A sort of 2, maybe 3-fingered head on that. As I say, quite bumpy, but completely transparent. A pale straw golden colour there. So let's give it a smell and see how we get on. Very grassy with kind of underlying citrus to it as well, definitely. And that's the typical thing that you get from the Pils beer. But yeah, definitely grassy. There's a slightly grainy aroma to it as well, but it's mainly sweet and grassy. And perhaps maybe just a little bit of caramel. Yeah, if you take it in a bit more deeply, you do pick up the caramel, but the sharper element of the smell, if you like, or the aroma, is definitely the grassy character in it. It really does smell like quite a pungent, sharp beer. It's actually got quite a bit more of an aroma than a lot of macro beers that I've come across. But yeah, it smells. It definitely has quite a pungent one, but you're getting a sort of bready and caramel aroma there on the when you take it in a little bit deeper, but it's definitely a sort of sharp, grassy and a little bit of a citric character that you're getting to the aroma. So let's give this guy a taste and see how we get on. Quite carbonated is the first impression that I'm getting from this guy. But yeah, it's got quite a cardboardy taste to it, if you like. It has that little bit of flavour to it. But you're also getting the pale kind of bready malts on the start as well. Just an underlying kind of hint of caramel when you leave it to sit for a wee while. But yeah, it quickly moves to the grassy hops, and I think there's even just a little bit of earthy character underlying with this one here. But yeah, you're starting off with the pale bready malts, the cardboard flavour and just an underlying bit of caramel in the malt base, and it moves to the grassy hops quite quickly, and there's even, I think there's a little bit of herbal character in there as well. Gives it off, maybe even some kind of floral and aromatic. The hops do have a little bit of something to them that's a bit more complex than a lot of normal macro beers that you get. But yeah, the grassy character is the sharp element to this beer, as it is in the aroma, and there is a little underlying citrus thing there with a kind of floral and herbal character coming in as well. Like I say, the little hoppy bite on this does have a little bit of complexity to it, but the malt base is kind of quite standard of a macro pils. You've got a little bit of the pale malts and a kind of cardboardy flavour. Not much bread, in fact, on this one. The more sort of pungent component of this beer is definitely the hops, so it's quite interesting in that regard. But I think this one's a lot better on tap. You can drink this around the city quite easily. Most places have the Heidelberg Pils or the 1603 on tap, but this one's definitely a lot better on the tap because you get more of the caramel coming out with it, and it's actually a bit better balanced than it is in the bottle. But yeah, I mean, in terms of a macro pils, it is quite interesting because, like I say, you've got a little bit of complexity to the hoppy part of the beer, and it's quite unusual to find that in a macro beer. And in terms of the mouthfeel, it's definitely a light-bodied one. It's got some quite crisp carbonation, in fact, and it's actually a bit more carbonated than most macro beers, which is quite nice. It makes it quite refreshing, but it does have a little bit of dry character throughout it, and it's bitter on the finish as well, with a kind of little hoppy kick. Like I say, the hops are the more prominent component of the beer. It's not just quite a malty one. It's not your kind of standard, kind of thing where they overdo the malt a little bit and you get very little hops. It's actually quite well done in the hoppy regard, but the malt base could be just a little bit better. But it's quite a refreshing one as well, and like they say, it's ideal for a kind of evening with friends. I can see this being a good barbecue beer for, you know, sitting outside in the sun and eating your sausages and things like that, and it's good. It's quite a sessionable beer, this. So and like I say, it is better on tap in the pubs out here, so it's a good beer garden beer as well. So if you're interested in a pils that is a little bit more hoppy, if you like, and has a little bit of hoppy complexity to it, you know, give this guy a try. And then honestly, it is quite nice on the tap. The bottle version maybe lets the beer down just a little bit, but the actual tap version is quite nice. You get a little bit more of the kind of caramel flavours there, which is really quite interesting. So if you are interested in that, give it a try and see how you get on with it. But please let me know in the comments section if you do happen to have tried this beer for yourself. Always interesting to hear that. I hope you found my kind of ramblings about the beer informative, and thanks again for your support over my kind of 180 or so videos that it is now. I really enjoy doing all these videos, so thanks for your continued support over that, and please like, subscribe, share, help the channel grow. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews, and I'll catch you soon with another one. Cheers.